Okay, welcome everyone to our class on how to learn Torah in depth. Now, what I want to do with you, because you probably did not get the occasion to listen to 70 different classes I gave. So what I want to do is just give you the highlights of, and then with these tools, you'll be able to handle the learning process. Okay. Now, of course, if you have all the tools, it's the best thing. But there's certain basics that if you have, like this idea of a statement and a question and an answer and a kasha and a teretz and a steer and a raya, they give you a very strong framework to handle really the give and take in the Gemara. So here's this book called Darkei Gemara Talmud. Did you ever look at that at all?
Is that by Steinsaltz?
Not at all. It's by someone who lived around 700 years ago, right before how much? No, not that long ago. Before Girish Svard, 600 years ago, 1490, no, 1500, yeah, around 500 years ago. Yeah. So it was a rabbi called Rabbi Yitzchak Kampenton. He was called the Gaon of Castile. He lived to be like 100 years old, very old man, and he died right before the Girish Svard. Now, he writes this little book called Darkei Talmud, and of course the Goyim never really, appreciate us learning Torah, so they refused to have the word Talmud anywhere around, and they censored it and they turned it to Dark, and we had to change it to Darkei Gemara. But now we're living in a better time, hopefully, excluding the news that we're hearing. But so the real name of the book is called Darkei Talmud, and we use that name. Okay, now. Small book. It's around, I guess, maybe around 15 pages. Really, that's a pamphlet, around 15 pages long. But it's written by a Rishon. So again, there's this way of compressing information into a few words that is used by all the great Torah scholars. And so what I do is I do this outlining thing, quite called visual logic, so that we can focus on the points, because if you don't do this type of activity, then what happens is, just like we were doing with the Chumash, that things go by very quickly. They go in one ear and out the other, as they say. So here, I'm just going to focus on some basic points, and then I'm going to go into the Mishnah with you, and we're going to apply these ideas. Okay. So the first thing he says, there's just no way out. If you want to get wisdom, then you have to spend a lot of time sitting. What does that mean, sitting? He says, and that's a key word. You have to spend a lot of time in investigating it very, very well. When you're talking about Torah, the way that the Torah is written is that it's very, as we said, compressed and dense, and therefore a cursory reading will not give you the true picture of what's being said. So you have to go over and over it again. That's the first rule. And the second one is, his second rule is, כל מבוקש שתבקש ולסגס לעשות בפעם ראשונה, שישתדל במריצות וחריצות לעין פעם. The second rule is, if you see that you're getting stuck, then you have to energize yourself to push forward with a lot of diligence and energy. Okay? People have a very low, especially in the world that we live in nowadays, where you just push a button and lights go on and I talk. It's like, wow, what's happening? Now with the iPad, you just move around with your finger. But so the frustration level in learning is very, very, very low. The minute something is too hard, let's go and have some candy and do something else, right? So the point in learning, though, it requires going through blocks. That means that there's information there. It's encoded in a very careful way, and when you first hit it, it doesn't make all that sense. It makes some sense, but when you start to investigate it, all of a sudden there's a level of confusion. You have to break through that level and keep going in order to have the text open up and to see the reality. It's lahavdil, a scientist, right? There's people that they study for years and years and years that have been trying to find a cure for cancer for what, 60, 70, 80 years, and the people go and they really put their energy into it. Anything that's meaningful requires serious energy and focused energy. And his rule over here is if there's a block in front of you, then you have to increase your energy, not give up, which unfortunately happens, too much, okay? And that's the second rule, okay? The third rule is that you have to ask Hashem for help. You have to daven. You cannot say, Kol chitzum yadi osei li. When it comes to Torah, if you don't ask Hashem to open up your mind and to see the truth and the depth of what's going on, it doesn't work. And this is a very important rule. This makes learning different than all other intellectual activities. It may also be true about other intellectual activities. I don't know, but there's people who are atheists and they can learn mathematics and they can learn whatever they want. But when it comes to Torah, you have to ask Hashem, open up my mind and let me understand what you're saying. Okay, now, that's the general introduction. You see, he went very quickly. Through rules, that you have to go over things many times. 2, when you hit a block, you're going to have to re-energize yourself. And 3, you have to daven to Hashem. And you have to ask him to help you. And that's why we say Abba Rabba, by the way, in davening every morning, right before Kriyat Shema. Now, so that's the introduction. Went real quick. Now he's going to give us a small set of rules that he wants us to apply whenever we're handling a text. And here are the rules. The first general rule cannot be underestimated or underemphasized. Klal gadol be'iyun, notice be'iyun, shetidakdek haloshen heitev. The first law of investigating something is that you must be precise with the language, extremely precise with the language that's being presented. That's why I always say, I make this pun on words, we're observant Jews. The first thing is careful observation. Okay? That if you're doing a pasuk or you're doing a Mishnah, your first rule is careful observation. The mind likes to take the easy route out. It thinks it understands, and now let's go on to the next thing. When it comes to learning Torah, you have to focus and be precise on what's being said, because every word, as he's going to say in 1 second, and every nuance is going to have a new bit of meaning. Now, here's what he says. Now, here's the specific rules. Tishtadel lirot. 1. Im yesh bo yiter lashon o kaful inyan. The first thing you should look for when you're examining a pasuk or a Mishnah, doesn't matter, these people who are writing at this type of level, is if there's extra language or a repeated subject. Now, I have to give you a little bit of a insight into this book. You maybe even know these things, it doesn't really matter, but this is classic. There's, in communication, in verbal communication or in written communication, in communication of language, put it that way, in speech, you have the words being used and the content of the words. Those are two separate things. I can talk about Mr. Moshe, and I can call him Mr. Schneider, or I can call him the man who made $3,000 in the stock market. There's a lot of ways I can describe a subject, okay? So there's one thing is the words that I use, but the next thing is the content, what those words are picturing. Okay, and that's called the inyan. So there's always the lashon inyan, which is the words being used and the subject being described. Okay, so that's why he says here you always have to look for both two qualities here. 1, is there any extra words being used? I.e., if this statement could have been said in 3 words, why were 4 words used? This statement could have been said in 2 words, why were 3 words used? Okay, so you have to look at the statement and said, could I have said this statement in a brief, in a briefer way, more brief? If not, if I could, then why is the statement adding words to describe this concept when it could have been economic, as you said, I think that was your word, economic, and use two words. So that's the first rule. It's called yitur lashon. See if there's any extra words, physical words. The second side of this equation, or this point, is kafel inyan, which means that even if different words are used, is this repeating something that we know already? Okay, even though it's different words, but did we learn this already for? Did we learn this concept already? If you're learning the Chumash, this pasuk, one pasuk says, ki ish umeis mos yumas. The other one says, ish ki kol nefesh mos yumas. So they seems that even though there's different words, it seems that when we go to the base meaning, the content, it looks like it's saying the same thing. Okay, so that's the second rule you have to do. See if this concept was stated anywhere else, which is amazing when you think about it. Just like you have all the limbs that you need to do the activities as a human being, there's no extra limbs. I used to think that when I was a kid, that the tonsils, throw them out. What's the difference? It's that was just an old vestige, of some other creation. Then they found all of a sudden it's a very complex system. Now, the Torah is by a Kodesh Baruch Hu. There is no extra language and there's no repetition of information. So you have to see if you're getting an extra word, then you know that there's a new concept being expressed here. And if you see that this idea seems to be repeated somewhere else, you're going to have to ask yourself, well, wait a minute. If it's repeated, so I'm missing something here. Why Hashem doesn't say the same thing twice? So why is it repeated? So that's the first rule. Look for extra language or repetition of ideas. Good?
Yeah.
The second one. Im yesh chiddush be'inyan hahu o b'mamar hahu olav. This rule is the most dramatic because he says, is what you're reading a new concept or not? Is it a new idea or is it a new statement? Now, what does a chiddush mean? A chiddush means that, in his language, he's going to express it as that I would have thought differently. Okay? A chiddush doesn't just mean a repetition of ideas, that's kafel inyan. A chiddush means, is this something that I would not have expected? If it's something that I would have known already, so it doesn't have to be said. So whenever the Torah speaks, it has to be telling you a new level of knowledge. Okay, a new level of knowledge, a chiddush. A chiddush means that you would have thought differently than what it's saying. So even if this is the first time you read a pasuk, or you read a statement in a Mishnah, right? It's not repeated. There's no extra words. But you say, wait a minute. This concept that's being spoken about is not repetitious, but it's obvious. So if it's obvious, why does the Tana or why does Kodesh Baruch Hu have to say it? Okay. Now that's a very dramatic rule. It has a lot of implications. It makes learning a different learning because now you have to go to say, wait a minute. It says if a man kills another man, so you should kill him. So you have to say, well, what's the chiddush of that? Isn't that obvious? No, it's not obvious because who says that because he killed that we have a right to kill him? Why is one thing equal to another? Okay, it's a chiddush. But you have to investigate what you would have thought and what the Torah is trying to teach us. An easy example, Shabbos, right? Let's give another example. Well, Shabbos is a good example too. We have these 39 malachas. If you didn't have the Torah, what would you do? Well, I'll tell you what you do. You'd be a guy, right? Shabbos would just be another day of the week. Why not? You could work, you can do what you want to do, but there's no difference between Shabbos and any other day. The Torah was mechadesh to us, the Jewish people. That's a special relationship that we have to that day. Okay, we have to mekadesh it. There's no 39 malachas. Okay, the idea of ribbis is also a chiddush. Ribbis in the world to take interest. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, what's the difference between any other commodity? Okay, so maybe there's no, maybe you shouldn't take too much. But still, if I loan you my, if I rent you my car, or if I rent you some money, what's the difference? You're paying me for renting of the money. What's it? No difference. The Torah says, no, we have a special obligation, ba'amecha, not to take ribbis to our friends, of the Jewish people. So that's a chiddush. You wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have thought that you had to make what is that called? Being nice to your friend there, and not charging him. Why? So this second rule is actually very, very revolutionary. It means every time you see something, you have to say what you would have thought, and then you have to come up with a alternative position, so that this position is teaching you a new level of a new level of being, like Shabbos, a new level. Okay, so that's a very, very powerful rule. The third one is called B'chol Shinui Lashon B'Shinui Din O Inyan Sheben Nosei L'Nosei Lama. Shinui means change. You have to recognize change. This is a very, every word here is very, very precious. I hate to be so repetitious myself, but when we were doing the Chumash, right, so we took the psukim, we put them one in a chart, one under each other, and we said to ourselves, now wait a minute, when it came to killing a man, the penalty was mos yumas. When it came to injuring the parents, all of a sudden the penalty was the same, right? So what happened? The din stayed the same, but the factors changed. Now, all of a sudden, when you get to an animal killing a man, right? The man sure killing a man. So there you have to pay money. So there the law actually changed. So if the law changed, why did it change? So the observation is a very important observation, is to look for change. We're coming up to Pesach. Okay, which means you have to investigate and see what changed from statement A to statement B, or law A to law B, or in the Mishnah we'll get to the same thing with case A and case B. Did the language change? If it did, explain to me why it did. If the law changed, explain to me what new factor in the case caused the change in law. If the subject matter changed, you say, well, why do we go from this subject to the next subject? Okay, why is a sota next to the nazir? Nazir after sota, right? Because if you get involved in wine, and these other terrible things happen. So that's called shinui inyan. So that's the third rule. Okay, so we have three rules. One, look for extra things or repetitious ideas. See if what you're saying, even if it's not repetitive, is a new idea, a new concept. And third, be an observant Jew and see if there is any change from one statement to the next in language, law, or in subject matter. If there is, ask yourself, why is it happening? So you have to be a very active reader here. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, the second big category. Udarashta v'chakarta v'sha'alta hetev. Three important rules. You have to dorish, you have to explain any change. You have to investigate things. You have to look into them and investigate them. And then you also have to ask. Not good enough just to think yourself. Ask. And he says later on, later on in the book explains that don't minimize your questions. Don't minimize your questions. Don't just say, okay, minimize means don't throw it under the rug. When you have a question, there's like we said there, whose problem is it? There's a problem there, right? So now you want to solve the problem. Don't say, well, it's a problem, let's go on to the next thing. You have to say, well, it's a problem. Now, what's the solution to the problem? Okay, so but here he says you have to sha'alta hetev v'tishtadel lahotzi kol haloshin. You have to ask very well on every point and try to hotzi kol haloshin be'inyan shekol mila b'mila v'kol chelek mimenu yora al davar lo haya muvan mikodem. So now he says, the statement. Every word of the statement, every part of the statement has to teach you new information. There can't be an extra letter. Forget about the whole statement being extra. Even they can't be an extra letter, they can't be an extra phrase. Everything has to be explained. That every condition that's being added here is teaching you something new. Okay, that's why when we went through the chart, every halacha has to be teaching you something new. If I could have learned one halacha from the next, then again, I could have just written one halacha. Why didn't two? Okay, so it's down to very, very fine distinctions, molecular. One letter too much already is a sign that you have to investigate it. Now he says, the third large category, you have to, number one, get to the shorish. What is the shorish? That's why I said in my, in the course, getting to the source. Okay, but whatever you see, you have to say, what is the source of this halacha? Okay, so if you're in the Mishnah, you're going to have to say, well, what's the source? Well, where's the source? It's going to be the Chumash. What line? What word? How is it derived? You have to always get back to the source, and that's why I call this little class here, I call it inside out, because you have to go from the out. Many times you're on the outside, right? You see halacha, okay, put on tefillin. You see halacha, there's 4 questions. You can see halacha, but that's the action that you must do, and of course you must do it. But when you're learning, you're looking for source. Like, why am I doing that act? Where does it say I should do that act? How do I know how that act should be performed in all its details? So that's called shorish, source. Etzem is you have to strip the case that you're dealing with down into its essential qualities. Okay, the essential qualities. And after you have the essential qualities, you have to do point v'hagbala so saviv bigvulav. You have to then define the limits of the law. Be'inyan sheteda mahu hanose o mahu mishpato. So you can clearly state what is the subject and what is its law. Okay, so that's what he says. That's why when we were doing the Chumash, you see, I first divided everything into Nosei and Mishpat. The Ramchal calls about Nosei and Nasu because he uses Nasu as a much more broad term, which means the rider and what it's carrying. Okay, but in our terms, what we're interested in understanding Hashem's Torah, so he's going to talk about a case, an osei, and a law. So when we looked at Mishpatim, lo and behold, the basic breakdown was case and law. But then you have to do these other things. Very nice. Now, I understand the case and law. Do I understand the etzem? Do I understand what is the primary case and which ones follow from it? And how do they follow from it? So that's what he wants you to do. And is also the limit of the law. How far does it go? Remember we said one case said makishu meis mosumas. The other one said ish kiyaka ish mosumas, right? So one said the poel, one didn't. The first one didn't say the poel, it said maka ish. We don't know who did it. The second one said ish kiyakeh. So there we saw the dynamic between those two pasukim was eliminating ish. You might think Ishor, so the other one says no. It extends the limit of the law to Ishor, but the other one, if I only had an unlimited subject, in other words, a non-defined subject, I would have said even a katan. So the first pasuk limits it to Isha, not katan. So there's the dynamic between the two pasukim, which will show us the limit of the law. Okay, so now this is a very big, but these are the basic rules that you have to really learn and to apply. This is much different. This book, by the way, is much different than Darkei Gemara. Than Derek Tfunas and Sefer Gayon. Okay, because it's for instance, in Darkei Gemara, in Derek Tfunos, he talks about diukim, inferences, right? And he says that there's inferences which are mukh and inferences which are bilti mukhrach. And then he gives a whole list of what's called a inference that you must have. All buses have wheels. If it doesn't have wheels, not a bus. He didn't give that. I'm just giving that example. And one thing that has wheels, it must be a bus. So he gives the technical aspects of logic. But here, the Rabbi Yisrael Konfentone is telling us about that special system of how to learn Torah. Torah has an internal system of logic, mechanics that produces its results, and you have to be involved in that internal system. Just using the external, human system, all men have legs, and Reuben is man, and Reuben has legs, right? Will not get you into the depth of Torah. That's a beginning step. If you don't have the beginning step, you have nothing. But here, the Yetzikin Kamdon is telling us the particular ways to handle the Torah text. And this idea of extreme diktuk lashon really only applies here. I mean, of course, people try to be medalic in their language when they're trying to communicate any idea, but you can be much more flexible in many, many subject areas. But here in Torah, you have to be very, very, very careful and precise in the use of language. Okay, so those are the basic rules. Why did I give you this little introduction? The book goes on to explain how to learn Rashi and how to learn the Ramban and Tosfos. There's many, many important, essential qualities of learning that are said in this book. Okay, I just wanted to do this little introduction because now we're going to go to the Mishnah, and with these tools, you see, we'll be able to appreciate the Mishnah. So, okay.
Has anybody translated that book, the Competon?
Who translated? We rough draft. That means David Sack and myself. I did a rough draft. Maybe I could even send you. It's a rough draft,
You read Hebrews.
But I think your Hebrew's fine. I don't think you need it. No, we never did it. We never.
No, I'm just wanting.
I can send you this.
If it's been published.
No, we were doing it. Now Feldheim collapsed and everything. I mean, it's one of our projects. But and I did rough drafts on it, and I then I wanted to go with David. It's a whole business. But in the end, I don't know what will be in the end. But this book that I just mentioned to you, Darkei Talmud, is an essential, a real essential, because it tells you not only the rules of learning, but also the attitude. What do I mean attitude? This idea that we just learned in the beginning, that you must go over things. You must, when you hit a stumbling block, you must re-energize yourself to go forward. And 3, you have to daven to Hashem. Now, those things have nothing to do, or little to do, with secular knowledge. A little bit it does. I mean, secular knowledge also is difficult. You have to push forward. Okay. But in Torah, this 3rd rule, the Torah is written in this very, very dense way, requires a tremendous amount of preciseness and understanding of the use of language. It's very mathematical, and you have to daven. If you don't daven, you're not going to. That's why you say Avarabba right before Krishma. You really have to ask Hashem, because it's this stuff is this is the secrets of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Even though we're talking about cows and people hitting each other, but this is all the secrets of a Kodesh Baruch Hu right here. And we're only talking Peshat. Forget about those higher, lofty levels. But every bit of Torah you have to ask Hashem for. Okay, so here we have a Mishnah, and the Mishnah is going to be the beginning of our what we call stage 2 or tier 2 in our learning process. The first, we did our investigation of the Chumash. Now we're going to see what the Mishnah has to say above the Chumash. Okay, so I'm going to use these rules, and I'm going to demonstrate some of them, because of course you're not familiar with them, but I'm just going to demonstrate how these rules are going to help us plummet the depths of what's being said here. Okay, so what's the first statement here? I'd like to get a little of your participation here. All right, we're going to read this first statement in the first Mishnah. Okay.
So there are 4 categories of damage: the bull, the hole, the mava, we said was the.
We have to discuss mava.
Fire, and which one is the the heaver is the fire.
Right.
Right.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So now in this one statement, I just want to demonstrate to you some of these rules that we just learned so that it becomes more tangible. First of all, the first problem here in the statement is the word arba. Why is that a problem? Because we said the first thing is to see if there is any extra words. Okay. Now, since the Mishnah tells us the shor, the bor, mav, and the hever, the rule is why do you have to count? What did you add by telling me for? I can count. We're not, again, a very important rule here. Atu b'shiftani eskinon or zil kori rav. Two things. Are we dealing here with fools? Number one, and number two, zil kori rav. Excuse me, the Gemara says peshita ma'ika mashman. This is obvious. What is it coming to tell us? Things which are obvious that you can do yourself, the Mishnah doesn't have to say. So to tell us that there's four and to list the four, they could have just said the avos nezikin, shor, bor, mav, and hever. Why does it have to say four? Okay, counting is something that every baby does. Zil kori rav. Okay, so that's an extra word. Okay, that's an example of an extra word. So the rule is that numbers in Mishnah, here's a Torah rule, always come to mamayet. It means 4 and not 13, not 4 and not 24. Okay, a rule. Okay. Now, the second word here is the word avot. So we ask ourselves, as he said, what is the chiddush of the word av? Okay, so we had a class on this, and I brought it up. It was very, very important. And we showed that in Sefer Hikayon, he talks about the muchash, the physical level thing, the low level, so to speak, or the closest to the physical reality level of concept, which labels reality. And then we separate things from reality and start using a higher level concept like color, which is still attached to something physical, but yet we say that the desk is brown and the book is brown and the bear is brown. So we start handling brown, even though it has a physical representation in reality, as a concept. And then we break away from reality completely, so to speak, and then start making categories of things like animal. And we said there's no direct physical object in the world called animal. There's either a bear, a cat, and a dog, and there's a new concept called animal. That's already a category. So we said also here in the Chumash spoke, when we looked at the Pesukim, of muchashim, physical, a man, physical, killing another man, an ox goring another man and killing him, right? They're all very low-level concepts. And you would think that that's as far as it goes, that you can't build a higher level concept from that particular case. If the particular case happens, then the law is mos yumas. If it happens in any other way, then you'd say, well, you don't have to pay. So for instance, if the animal, instead of goring, he would kick somebody, right? So you'd say, well, the Torah only says if you gore, you have to pay. If the animal kicked another animal, right, or he squatted down on the animal, or he shoved the animal, even though he wanted to damage the animal, well, I'm sorry, that's out of the definition. Again, Hagbala, it's out of the, we just learned before Talmud, that's out of the definition of the law. So the chiddush of this Mishnah is that these muchashim cases, these physical cases, really represent categorical classes. And that's a quantum jump in our understanding of these particular cases in the Chumash. Now, in Darkei Gemara, he has a wonderful, that's why I really recommend that book. He talks about when the Torah expands a particular case and when it contracts it. Okay, that's a whole discussion that we'll have, Bezrat Hashem, as we do our learning. But here, the big chiddush of the word av is that these cases represent categorical principles and not particular case. Okay, so we asked ourselves, what is the new chiddush here in the Mishnah? The first one we said, wait a minute, arba is not a chiddush, we can count. We said there is a chiddush because it's going to eliminate other ones. Here we said, what's the chiddush of saying the word avos? So we said, this is telling us that these shor, bor, mav, and hever, which look like particulars, are really categorical. Okay? With me? Now, the third word, the third word here is nezikin. Okay? Now, in Hebrew, it should say mazikin, not nizikin. Nizikin is the passive, right? I think we spoke about this. Okay, so that's called a shinui lashon that we just learned. Shinui lashon. Shinui means a change in language. Why did it change from the norm? Okay. No, the Ran speaks about this. I asked Rabbi Hyman Olvashon once. He said, really? He gave me a drush. I'll just tell it. You go say, well, I think it was a very interesting drush. He said, when you're a mazik, you ended up to be a nizak. That means you end up hurting yourself. That's what he said. And we see, right? The Torah says you have to pay things. You're ending up damaging yourself. So it's really reflective. Okay, that's not what the Ran says. That's what he said as a drush. But anyway, but you have to answer by doing this method of careful analysis and having the tools to do it. All of a sudden, you begin to enter into what's really being said and not what's just being said on the surface. Okay, so those are the first three words. Now, here we have a shor, habor, mava, and a heaven. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to have a problem with this word mava. Okay, but before we get to mava, let's find what we do know and what we don't know. Okay, so when we looked at the Pesukim, let's get those back again. How can I get the Pesukim? I think I'm going to open up another text. Should I do that? Yeah, let me open up another text just to do that.
What's the?
Go ahead.
What's the, on just a very short level, what's the root? What's the shorish of the word mava?
There's a big discussion Gemara what it means, so I don't want to get so much involved in it. Okay, we're going to have a whole discussion in it because it depends what the shorish and where it's learned from and how it's learned. It's a big discussion. So if I open up that, we'll. Oops, I'm sorry, I just did the wrong thing as usual. Not usual, but whatever. Okay, let's go back. Control Home. Let's look at not this one either. We're going to get there. Okay, I'll just down to the. Okay, here's a little chart here. Okay. Here is, we start with the shore because that's the first thing mentioned in the Mishnah, right? Yeah? Are you with me? Did I lose you?
Yeah. No, I'm here. Listen.
The sound is with you, right?
Hello?
Okay. So here's our Pesukim. Hello? Are you with me? Okay, great.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure
so here are Pesukim as they, do you see the chart in front of you? Here's the Pesukim as they read, right? Now, in other words, we spoke about all these Pesukim before was man the damager, right? You got man murdering another man, hitting his parents, the ganav of the kidnapper, the cursor of his parents, Rahmanas, the damage, right? The damage done to a bystander, a woman. Those were all the victims over there. The aggressor was a man. And the victim was also a man, very interestingly enough. But here in the second group of Pesukim, which come right after it, it started talking about man's property, his shore, right? Ki yikach shor es ish o isha umes sakel yisakel ashor v'lo yechel basaro bal ashor naki. Okay, so the second level that we spoke about, we said shinui inyan. Shinui inyan. Remember we learned that before in the beginning of the class? Look for now here's a shinui inyan. We switched from man the damager to animals the damager. Correct? That's the shore, is the damager. He's the active. So the victim here happens to be the same. No, excuse me. I'm sorry. It's not. Kigak shore. No, the victim is the same. Yes, correct. It says Kigach shore es ish ose shore. So the victim is the same, remains constant, but the aggressor here changed to an animal. Okay, and then we notice on the other side the law changed. It also changed from Misa to, okay, the shore gets killed, but the Baal HaShor is Naki. Doesn't get killed, he only loses money. Right? Okay, so the law changed. So now there's a Shinui Indian here. How come the Torah switched from man aggressor to animal the aggressor? Why did it do that? So that was our beginning move to understand that the animal is a lower level of responsibility that the man has. In other words, the first level of responsibility, as we say inside out, is that the man has to control himself. If he doesn't control himself, chas v'shalom, and is an aggressor, then he's going to have to suffer the consequences. The second thing, inside out, the next level is he has to control his property. Okay? And the first type of property he has to control is that shore, that animal that he owns. Okay? So it's not him now, it's his property. Very good. Okay? So the first thing that the Torah spoke about in this category is the shore. So we notice already, our Mishnah says shore, bor, mav, and hever, correct? So we focus and we go again inside to the shoresh of the Mishnah. We say, well, this Mishnah is focusing on this pasuk in the Chumash. Now, after it talks about the tam and the muad, which means 1 and 3 times damagers, then it goes to what goes to the bor. It says ki yiftach ish bor, o ki yikara ish bor, v'yoch yichasenu, v'nofel shama shor chamor, baal habor yishalem kesev, yoshiv lebalav, v'amesiyeh lo. So the next level that the Torah speaks about is the bor. So far we have an understanding of why the Mishnah is the order of the Mishnah. It makes sense so far, right? Because the first thing that was spoken about here was shore, and the second thing it was talking about bor. Okay. Now we have this problem. We have this word mava. So before I get into the word mava, let's look at the other given word, and that's the word hever. Ha-hever. Okay. Now, we can identify this variable by looking at the statement which says the shore and the bor is not like the mava. I'm sorry. The shore and the mava, which have ruach hayim, so we know mava is some sort of living thing, is not like the fire that doesn't have life. So the shore and the bor, the shore and the mava, it skipped bor. The shore and the mava, that's what it says. Lo hari hashor kari mava, lo hari mava kari shore, v'lo zeh v'zeh, not the shore and the mava that have ruach hayim, both the shore and the mava have life, is not like the aish that doesn't have life. So this one, that's factor 1, shore and mava, distinguish itself from the hever because the shore and the mava have life, they're living, and the hever does not have life. Okay, now we see there's a shinui lashon here, right? Because we know we're not talking about the bor. So the only thing left is that the shore and the mava have life are not like the aish, says the Mishnah. Are you with me? So the question is, this word hever must mean aish. Is that correct? It can't mean bor, because we're going to talk about bor in a second. It can't be shore and mava, because we just spoke about shore and mava. So the only thing it can mean is Aish, right? So the word hever means Aish. We did that through a process of elimination, correct?
Yeah.
However, the Rabbi Yitzchak Kamponton said, you have to ask yourself, why is there a Shinui Lashon? Why is there a change of language? If already we're going to use either say hever here, or say hev, or say Aish, correct? There's a change of language here. You have the same subject being described in two different ways. So he says to yourself, you have to say lama. Lama. You see? Why did it change? This is a purposeful, there's nothing here that says change. Okay.
It's actually, it creates a problem for the change, well, not the change, but if, as we're saying, that the word avos is indicating that these four things are not specific cases, but actually in the lashon of specific cases, they're really referring to four categories. Mm-hmm. So you would have thought that the word Aish would appear there dafka, like the word shor and bor. It would make more sense. But if it's saying hever, then, I mean, I still don't know exactly what it means by hever, but it's jumping, it's giving it a generic term. So then you don't need the word avos there anymore. Oh,
you're saying hever is more of a generic term then? Okay. That's a very subtle question that you're answering. You know, yeah. That's interesting. The word hever comes from the word that I can help you with. That comes from the word bier. Bier means to consume, like bier chametz, right?
Bier chametz, right?
Right. Yeah. And if you look at the Pesukim again, if we look at, oops, that's not the Pesukim. All these fancy things here. This is, if you have Word, you can get a special program that you can do this. Otherwise, you can't do this in Word. Okay, look, when the Torah spoke about Aish, it says, Ki teitze Aish mozakotzim, v'na'achal, gedish o hakama osodeh, shalem yishalem et hamavir, I wish I had that nikud there, et havara. So the destroyer has to pay what he destroyed. Okay? So the word beer is used. The beer is also used in the pasuk before, ki yavara ish, when a man destroys the soda or keren. So the word beer means to destroy. Okay? But here we see it's associated with the word aish. Okay, but it's also associated with other things, like we saw with this animal going into the other field. Okay, he's also a destroyer. So it just means a consumer. Fire consumes and animals consume. Okay, and here the Torah uses shinui lashon. He calls him first ochel. He's ochel. It's even the word, right? He's ochel. The fire eats up the gedish. It's very interesting. Okay, so we see a lot of these shinui lashons, but at least what I'm trying to do is to focus that the word aish is called a consumer. Okay, so the question is, why did the Torah do that? But also, there's another interesting thing that I wanted to bring out. This is all written down. It's not my observations, but it's interesting. Look what the Torah did. Jumped from the shore and the bore, right? Correct. Now, what happened in between? And the last thing was Aish, right? So who is this Mava that stands in between? Shor, bor, and Aish, that's good. That's number one, number two, and then the third thing in this category before we go to the Shomrim. Okay, when people give things to borrow and they loan, they rent everything here. That's a new category, a new level. On this level, we have the shor and the bor. That's the first two things. And we have the last thing, which is called Aish. So the third thing is somewhere, as true investigators, should be somewhere here. It either has to be, we have here's shore, bor. Very interesting, by the way. This is also very interesting because we go shore, bor, we go back to shore again. What was the difference between this shore and this shore doing damage? Here's the victim. Here, the shore kills a man and a woman. Then we go to bor, and then this shore kills a shore. Okay, you see that? But that's another thing that we have to discuss, and we did discuss it in the declination, so to speak, of the Torah. But at least the Torah starts talking about shore, then it goes to bor, and then it talks about ganav, and then it talks about Shane and Rego, okay, trampling, eating another man's field. Okay, and then finally Aish. So in here, we either Mav is going to be this or it's going to be this, right? Right? If we're saying that if we, right?
You mean it's going to be Aganav or Shane and Regal?
That's right. If we say strictly, if the Mishnah is presenting its information according to the presentation in the Torah, so then it has to be that Mav is equal Ganav, or it's Shane and Rego, right? I mean, that's what our observations are giving us, correct? That's the middle point between Aish and the shore and the bore.
But then it would mean, if it's Shen and Regal, then there would seem to be a kind of redundancy, at least in classifying the avois and the arba avois, and you're saying that shore is one of the arba avois, and then you have a separate category for Shen and Regal, which is really, at least it seems to be part of shore. Well, which is fine, but then it would just mean you're dividing shore into two categories. There's I guess shore that gores, and then the ox that either eats or tramples.
Yes, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
The first shore is the shore that gores, and the second one is the shore that eats or tramples, right? And okay, so we can do it. It works. Now, what you're beginning to do is recreate the whole Gemara, believe it or not, because again, the people in the Gemara are extremely logical. They're just going from point A to point B to point C to point D. Okay, that's what they're doing. So anytime you're traveling down that path, you're going to go through the same steps. And this is exactly the big problem. The first problem in this Gemara is the Seder of the shore, bore, mama, and the hever. Okay, now the shore and the bore has problems because so Rashi says in the beginning that the Torah starts with shore and then goes to bore, and that's all he says. And you want to fill in the rest, that the Mav and the Hever continues. Okay, so the Rashi tells us the word Mav is a machlokas. What's the machlokas? Let's just get into that a little more. What I'm trying to do is get you into the framework of how the system works. Okay? It's a logical system, and you have to get into the framework. And everything is a logical step from point A to point B to point C. As Rabbi Zimmerman used to say, it's either sense or nonsense. So we have to always be on a sensible path. Good. So there's a Rav. There's two great rabbis that argue about this point of what Mava is. One is called Rav, and the other one is called Shmuel. They are very, very central, what do you call it, that argue each other throughout Shas. They're foils of each other, whatever. Anyway. Antagonists. Yeah. So Rav, okay, I'm going to do it outside because, again, I don't want to get it. Rav says that the word shore means Karen, Shane, and Regal. Like you said, it's a kollel name. But it includes everything. Karen, Shane, and Regal. So then what could Mava be?
Ganav.
So he says it's man. He says it's man, the damager. He doesn't say Ganav, right? He says it's a general word that means, just like shore is a general word for all the activities of shore, the Mava is a general word for all the activities of man.
Why not specifically Ganav? I mean, isn't the whole problem one? Isn't it a matter of deriving the order of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi from the Chumash? Isn't that the issue? I mean, isn't the whole issue the same? Look, there's an order here that Rabbi Yehuda
has. Yes.
So then, So why does he make it more general than what the Chumash itself says?
Very good question. Because look what he did with shore. Why didn't you ask that question with shore? Why did he make the shore more general than the Chumash made too?
Right. Good. Yeah. Right. Right.
The shore could have been
I think that's
the Karen, Shane, and Regel. What do you mean?
right.
He's generalizing to Karen, Shane, and Regel. We're not particularizing. So he says, just like I'm going to generalize with the shore, and even though the shore was mentioned first, and he was repeated at the end after, right? Because he's repeated that our poor shore comes in the beginning, killing men. Okay, then he starts killing animals, right? Then there's this break here with the Ganav, and then all of a sudden he comes back again, trampling. So the Chumash itself separated this the shore into different compartments, so to speak, and then it put this
Hmm.
Ganav in the middle there. So the way that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi presented it, according to Rav, is that we're really talking about the general categories, and that's why I put all of shore together. The Torah started speaking about shore, and I am going to talk about the shore as a unit of all his properties. We have to understand what that unit is and why it is. There's all the questions we have to answer, but at least we're stage one of our conceptualization. So Rav says the shore of Reb Yehuda is the Karen, the Shane, and the Regel. It's a categorical unit, and that's why the Mava also is not a particular Ganav, but it's man the damager. Okay, in general, because we know that man, first of all, man was mentioned above, but that's going to be man damaging another man. So we're going to have a lot of discussion here. You'll see that because of this beginning, opening, we're going to have a lot of discussion in the Gemara about this point, okay? Because we have to define we cannot understand this unless our terms are first defined, and that's true about any statement. If you don't first define your terms, then you don't know what you're moving around and what you're adding, what you're subtracting. So that's what Rav says. Rav says that the Mava really, it means man, okay? Very good. And he brings a proof from the Tanakh, and then, but okay, and then Shmuel comes along and he says, no, you should not have, yes.
Can I just ask you,
Yes.
I mean, I don't know what Rav says, but is a factor in Rav's reasoning that in what's being delineated are the four agents? In other words, if we're grammatically, if we're looking at the subjects, so we're not looking at, Shane and Regel are anatomical parts of a shore, who's the subject. So if he's including Shane and Regel with Karen, so he's saying, look, we're looking only at individuals. So the first individual is a bull, the second one is a whole, and the third one is a human. So a Ganav, Ganav is two.
Is a type of human, you say?
Is a type of human, exactly. Just like Shane and Regel, it's not like Shane and Regel because those are parts of the bull. But is he saying that the Mishnah is identifying agents, and therefore, insofar as we're talking about a Ganav, we're talking about a human being as an agent.
Okay, very good.
In,
No, I'm sure. Again, we'll after this little introduction. I mean, I see what's the problem here? The problem is each piece of Torah that you touch is a very deep and delicate construction. So, like, I really want to get to the meta, but I would love to investigate each one of these pieces because they're beautiful pieces, each one, very carefully and finely discussed. But you're in the right track, okay? And that's what you must do. You must first develop a hypothesis, and then compare your hypothesis to what the great Rabbanan have said, and see why they accept or reject your hypothesis. And then you begin to be involved in what is at stake by saying X, Y, or Z. Okay, as an untrained person, you can flail and say anything you want, but when you're involved in the delicate mechanics of going on, so you see you're much more limited. Okay, so we said like this to recap. Rav says that the word shore includes the Karen, Shane, and Regel, and therefore the only thing left that we can identify as is the man. Okay? Shmuel takes a different track, and he says, no, we're not talking about Karen at all, because if you noticed in Karen Karen was something that moved from a tam to a muad, and he maintains that the Mishnah is only talking about muadim. So muad means that's muad lechatchila. That's what he maintains. So therefore, the shore here is regel, and the mava is shane. And he brings a proof that mava can mean shane in the Tanakh. That's interesting. But look what he did here. The shore. He says the whole discussion here is concentrated on this pasuk, right? And what's very, very unusual, very hard to understand, well, is if this shore is a regel and the mava is a shane, so why does bor come in the middle of it? Now you've lost any seder, it seems, in the pasukim. Because why does bor come in the middle? And also, why should the word shore, which is a categorical name, have a referent as a particular of rego?
It would almost seem that his, again, I'm just hypothesizing here,
exactly.
as you say. But it would seem that if in fact Rav is focusing on the subjects, on the agents of the damage, then Shmuel would be focusing on the type of the damage, so that the agent becomes irrelevant, and he says, look, that shane is a much more active type of damage, and regel is like trampling, so it's closer to it's down on the list, closer to fire. And that's just a hypothesis.
Okay, the ongoing question is, again, with him, we don't understand what seems to be very, the order that's picked by Shmuel. In other words, why do we say shore, bor, mava, and hever? Shore, mava, bor, and hever. I mean, why did he pick this order? You have why did he pick this order now?
Well, what I'm
again, it has nothing to do with the Chumash now. And even if you're telling me it has to do with particular agents, but...
No, I'm saying that Shmuel, I'm trying to figure it out for myself. If Shmuel is not focusing on agents, but rather on types of damage, the actual act of damage.
The act of damage, very good.
So then I assume that he would say that first of all, there's a difference in level of damage between shane and regel. Shane is again speculating. Shane is more active and more intentional. Regel is less, so therefore it's down on the list closer to eight, which is an inanimate thing. And somehow bor then would make it in between them. Somehow bor is closer to the activity of shane than even regel. But if that's possible, if you could abstract them.
Okay, the problem is that according to our study of the Chumash, our humble study of the Chumash, it looked like that there was a declination of damagers, right? From man being the most responsible to his animal, which is more active, to the Aish. To the Aish or to the Bor. We have to explain why Bor was there. We gave little svars. But what I'm saying is, why in the Chumash, if that's true, then the Bor, there was more responsibility for the Bor than there was for the shore and the regel. Okay, so why was the Bor placed? Why was the Bor should have been placed first? It should have said bor, shane, and regel, right? It should have said what? It should have said shore and mava, then bor and aish. That's if it was following the order of the Chumash. Shore, but it doesn't make any sense. You should have started with bor first, because that was mentioned before the shane and the regel. right? And then if you want to say that there's two parts of shore, one is called the shore and one's called the mava, right? So then put them together and then put the bor and the aish one after another. So he's going to have a difficulty in describing why the Chumash picked the order, why the Mishnah picked the order that it did in this interaction between him and the Chumash. Okay, like you have to say, what is his guiding principle? Okay, so this is problem number. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just assumed that he has to see some kind of radical difference between Shane and Regel. It's so radical that it could even jump over, or that you could stick something in between them, namely bor.
Yeah, so you wanted to make you want to say Shane is much more conscious than the bor, and the Regel is the least, or something like that. We're starting
Right.
off. Sorry, we're starting. Excuse me.
Right.
We're going to start with Regel first, by the way. He has it Regel, bor, and Shane. Regel, bor, and Shane.
Regel is first.
Yeah. Because Mav is Shane. That's how everything is mixed up in his world. I mean, the first four are totally mixed up. They don't make too much sense. I mean, again, at first glance, we're beginning our discussion. We're trying to form ideas, and then we're trying to go to the next level. But in the surface level, Regel is first, bor is second, Shane is third, and then there's aish. Doesn't make too much sense. And what also doesn't make too much sense is because maybe he has a different standard, you're going to have to say, because again, this is a very hard pasuk. Kiyavar ish sort of a karen b'shalach. But the way that the Gemara is going to learn is that this v'shilach is bi'ara u'bir b'storei. You're right. The shilach will be the Regel, and that's okay. And this is going to be the Shane. So that does work according to him. At least the order internally in the Chumash is really it's Regel and Shane. First the Regel is spoken about, and then the Shane is spoken about. Okay. Okay. So anyway, this is Shilach.
Shilach refers to Regel?
Yeah.
Is Regel?
Yeah. The Shilach they say is Regel, and beer is Shane, because Shilach is walking, and beer is to consuming. Okay. Anyway. This is a very, very important issue and a very serious issue. And we're getting a taste, okay? That's all we can do in the short amount of time that we have, okay? So we saw over here, we asked, on every single one of these words we have a problem, okay? We said arba is miut, we said avos is categorical, and the zikin is in the passive, it should be in the active. We came to the shore, the bor, and the mav, and the hevel. We said, in what order are these written in? That's the next question. Okay, because remember, the person who's presenting this information is, we didn't clear the question. Is it the Kodesh Baruch Hu that gave this statement to Moshe Rabbeinu, or is this how Rabbi Yehuda Nasi put it together? I don't know. But whoever it is, either Kodesh Baruch Hu or Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, they're highly conscious people. Or the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Okay, so there has to be a very deep meaning to the order that was picked. So if I didn't have even the Chumash to look at, I would really be in trouble, because first of all, I can identify three items, and Mava is problematic. I know it's some sort of living thing, so it has to be either a man or an animal. There's no other living things that we know about. I know that has to be one of the two possibilities, but I don't see any logic in the order, because I would have put, if it's man, Mava, then put man first. He's the most responsible, right? And like in the Chumash first talks about man, the killer. So put him first, then talk about the shore and the bor, and then talk about the hever. That's how it should have been. I mean, in other words, if you talked about a logical declension, I'm trying to look for a better word, but you understand what I'm meaning, that if the Pesukim go down from the most responsible to less areas of responsibility, and then changes the law concordingly. So talk about Mava, number one. He's the man. He's the most responsible. Then talk about his animals. Okay. Then talk about the bore. Fine, we said because man built the bore. Okay, whatever. And then talk about the fire. But put man first. Here, man is in the third position according to Rav. Okay. So the order is a real problematic thing. Now we have other problems in order here because also when we look at the next statement, it says that the shore is not like the mava, right? The shore is not like the mava. It says the mava is not like the shore. It says both of them. It gives its converse, right? But it jumped the order here. Now all of a sudden it skips bore, right? And it tells us the shore is not like the mamba. Why didn't it start? If you tell me A, B, C, D, so tell me A is not like B and B is not like A. Why are you telling me A is not like C and C is not like A? So here's another shinui, a change in order that we have to investigate. I mean, why did it do such a thing? Either make up, if you want to present your information by saying the shore is not like the mava, so start off saying there's 4 types in the Zekin, the shore, the mava, the aish, and the bore. Say it that way. In other words, if I look at the way that the Mishnah is going to present the information, so I see it first talks about the shore. Okay, very good. That's fine. It skips to the mava. Then it says both those are not like the aish. It goes to the aish, and it finally ends up with the bore. Okay, so present that. In other words, if the analysis is the essence, so then put the first 4 in the order of your analysis. And if the presentation of the Seder is important, so then also say, present your information like the Seder. Say, lo har shor kahari bor, or hari bor kahari shor. Okay? So you come to, again, I'm saying a lot of things outside because you have to read Rashi, and Rashi's involved in every one of these problems. Every one. Rashi is unbelievable. You could say Rashi was great, but when you start learning deeply, you see he was not great. He was like greater than great because he is involved in every one of these nuances, and he directs himself to these nuances, and he's answering questions in a way that a child can learn. But he's involved in all these problems. So I'm just going to say, I'm bringing it outside just so that we get, again, a flavor of what's going on here. All right? So we notice that the second part, by the way, which we haven't investigated, the first statement we investigated. Now there's going to be an analysis here, you see? There's going to be an analysis. The analysis is that certain of these cases are not like other cases, and even if you had 2 or 3, it's not like the third, and yet there's going to be a commonality between all the cases. Okay, so that is a question of what we call, again, lumdus, which means the Mishnah now is going to start talking about the way that the Torah is going to teach us these dinim. It has a certain problem in the need for all these 4 cases. So let's see if we can get slowly into that. And the reason I brought that up is because that's for lack of a better word, a process problem. It's not just simply repeating the first thing when it says shor bo mav and hever. Well, we discussed a little bit what the order was, but if we said at least according to Rav, it's more the order of the Chumash. It's more clearly the order of the Chumash. And Shmuel, we're going to have to say it's a different order of something else. We haven't defined it yet. But the second stage is going to be talking about a problem in the learning process, which is, as we started the class, we said that there can't be any repetition of information in the Chumash. So if I could have learned, or if I derived the din in one case from another case, so that makes the Torah repetitious. It's a kefil inyan. It's saying the same thing twice. Or so that's the real problem over here in this next little section. And again, I'm saying this in light of the Gemara because I'm really compacting a lot of stuff that the Gemara says into just a discussion again to get this flavor. So the Gemara says, Lo harya shor kaharya mava. It says that the case of shor is different than the case of mava. One of the ways that you can test the import of a statement is to change what's called the kesher. I think they call it is or is not. Is that copular? A copular? What is a copular? Is that is or is not?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think
is a copular. Yeah. Or
yeah.
Conjunctive, maybe. Conjunctive.
Yeah, because it's the with. I think the with. But anyway, the statements are based with no conjunction. Yeah, it's not really conjunction. Anyway, let me tell you what the Ramchal talks about. He talks about the kesher. In other words, you have an asu, then you have the word is or isn't. In other words, it's either a mekayim or a shlili. Is a word, it's a mekayim, that this table is brown, right? Is not is a shlili. This table is not brown. Basically, you're saying that the predicate is or is not found in the subject. Okay? So one of the ways that you can determine the chiddush of the statement is just to reverse this kesher. If the statement says that this is not like, A is not like B, so you say, well, that's because you would have thought A is like B. Because the Hiddish, it's telling you it's not like, must be you would have thought it is like B. Because if it really was obvious that it's not like B, so then why does it have to tell it to you? So it must be that there's a good reason to say that A is like B, and it's trying to tell us a Hiddish that it's not like B. Are you with me on that? I don't know if that's okay. So
that supports Rav's, I think, Rav's approach. In other words, that the shor and the mave, it makes the mave, it's more likely that the mave is a human, because he's like, you might think he is like the animal. I mean, if it suggests that if there is a likeness between any two of these four terms, the natural one would be between the animal, the first and the third term of the animal, and therefore the human, and the Mishnah is saying, no, it's actually, they're not.
Well, again, but the animalistic part also exists, and here's the problem. We know Mava has this quality, we're going to learn for it in 1 second, of called Ruach Chaim. Okay, so we know that both Mava and the shore has the quality of Ruach Chaim. They definitely are animals. The question is, what type of animals are they? Are they a human animal? Or are they a shore animal? There's got to be one or the other. It's either a human animal or a shore animal. If it's a shore animal, well, we spoke about the shore. So it has to be a different, what type of different shore is it? So that's why Shmuel says, Shmuel's position is, first of all, we know that shore and Mava are animals. And I'm going to tell you that Mava really is man. Excuse me, I said that wrong. Shmuel says Mava is Shane. So wait a minute. So what's shore then? Oh, that's Rego. So shore, because Mava can't be a human being, and we have to ask Shmuel why he does not want to say Mava is a human being. Okay. But he says Mava is not a human being. It's an animal, just like the shore. So what part of the shore is it? He says, oh, it's the Shane, and then the other part of the shore is the Rego. That's where he gets to his logic.
Right.
But Rob says no. There's no. You can't do that. He has to explain why. Also, we're not getting into the depth of it. But basically, he says that Mav is man. So then, what is shore? We know that the shore is Karen Shane, right? The shore is broken up into two parts. He says it's all of shore. Okay, but what I was trying to say is Mava has to be a Baal Chai. Mava's alive. The question is, we only have two possibilities. It's either subdivision of shore or it's man. Now, the Mishnah is telling us that the shore is not like the Mava and the Mava is not like the shore. So I said the way we can determine what this new idea is by taking the opposite of what the Mishnah says. And what would be if the Mava was like the shore? Why does the Mishnah have to tell us that the shore is not like the Mava? What would the world look like if the shore was like the Mava? What's the problem? Let the shore be like the Mava. Why is the Mishnah going out of its way to tell us that the shore is not like the Mava? Okay. Another question is, isn't it, no matter what the shore is, whether it's Keren Shein Regel or it's Regel itself, isn't it obvious that the shore is not like the Mava? I mean, isn't it obvious that a human being is not like an animal is like a human being? I mean,
right, which would.
So what's the chiddush here? Again, it doesn't seem there's a chiddush here, because if you're telling me that the shore is not, that's peshita, my kamash malan. I mean, and what? So these things have to be explained. So you can't get away. You can't say that you've understood this Mishnah unless you investigate deeply these problems, right?
Well, but these things are talking about categories, though, so it's not.
Even if they are categories, but isn't it obviously that let's take the worst one. Let's take the worst. All right, let's take the category of Rav. The category of shore is not like the category of man.
Well, but it might be if it's a category. I mean, obviously a bull is not a man, but if we're talking about categories,
yeah.
So there might be reason to suppose that they are similar.
What is that?
I mean, they are in fact similar. They're both balachayim. It says they're both of ruach hachaim. So it gives. I mean, the problem here is that when we're talking about genera and species.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a similarity and a difference. They're both at play. So two things are the way Plato's phrase for it is sameness in difference.
Exactly.
So they're both at play. So a shore and a mave have sameness between them. They're both ruach, but they also have a difference, and that's see. It's also a question that pops out to me is, why do you have this? If you're already saying lo hare shor ke hare mave, A is not like B, so why would you apparently redundantly say, and by the way, B is not like A either? I mean, is that covered by A is not like B? Why do you say
now
lo hare mave ke hare shor?
Okay, now that question I can answer you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I have some idea of how to answer it.
No, because because A is not like B does not mean that B is not like A. In which sense? Okay, so now let's introduce some external information, okay? The Gemara is very, very concerned. I mean, it's rightfully concerned. What is this statement coming to teach us? Okay, as I said, l'chora, however you're going to categorize it, I mean, why do I have to, these categories seem to be distinct no matter who you're talking about. Okay, Shmuel, there's a subtle distinction between the Shein and the Regel, okay? Even though, very interesting here, it's just another side point, the Mishnah doesn't even tell us what the difference is. When it came to why the Mava and the shore is different than the A, she told us that the Mav and the Shem have Ruach Hayin and the shore doesn't. Here, it doesn't tell us what the difference between the shore and the Mav is, or the Mav is and the shore. So the Mishnah the Gemara is dealing with this issue. Like, what is the chiddush? I mean, no matter what you say, first of all, of course, it doesn't tell us what the factor is. Why are they not different? But why would you need to say that they are different? Isn't it obvious that they're different? No matter how you learn. Isn't the Shein obviously different than the Regel? Isn't the shore obviously different than the man? So the Mishnah says that the meaning of this statement is something, it's the learning level. Lisnei chada. The question here is, why do I need both shore and mava? Can I learn one from the other? So you're talking about, well, your two words, sameness and difference, right?
Yeah. It's sameness in difference, not and. You know,
Sameness.
that's the
Oh, sameness in difference.
in difference. Yeah. In other words, that difference only makes sense if there's some sameness and vice versa.
Okay,
Like
but
the
that's
truth,
okay.
right?
That's another very interesting and deep philosophical question. How those two parts are related. We're using it, or I'm using it here now to explain another concept. It's an associated concept, but it's not the philosophical concept. If the Torah writes case A, right? Now we already were taught that these cases are not particular cases, correct? They represent categorical cases. Good. So now when we talk about learning or deriving one case from the next, how do we do it? We either do it through similarity, in other words, A is equal to B, so therefore whatever A has, B has. You tell me that the similar, that's why I talked about the sameness. If I'm looking at the case and I'm comparing these two cases and I say that they have the same factor that's causing the din, so then I only need one case. But if I look at the peculiarities of the case and I say that's causing the din, then I couldn't derive one from the other. So when the Torah talks about the case of shore, for instance, which factor is producing the dinim of your obligation to watch the shore, pay for the shore? What is it coming from? Is it coming from the fact that the shore is a living thing and living things have to be watched? Or is it coming because of the peculiar elements of the shore? Like he gores, he can do things that man doesn't necessarily do. He gores, he bites, he walks. Is any specific case teaching you its law because of its generality or its particular? What is it? What's the factor in any case that is producing the law? A shore has two factors. It has a general factor that it's an animal, in which case if it's an animal, it's a chayav. Certainly you should be chayav as a human being, for instance. But it also has particular particularities which may be the reason why you have to watch the animal, i.e., it has sharp, pointy things on its head. It's unconscious of its if it's unconscious of its walking and all these things. And then also that's where my thinking is going. What will be the difference? Because when you learn what the Mishnah here is, according to the Gemara, the Mishnah is saying one case and I can derive the other. So what you're saying is that the LCD between the two cases are equal, and we're not going to consider the unique factors in the case, and say that the law here of being obligated to watch is coming from the lower factor and not the higher factor. In other words, when the Torah could have written shore and you would have known somehow man, which is hard to say in Svara, but well, not really. You say if I'm obligated to watch my animal, certainly I'm obligated to watch myself. Anyway, this is where the thinking has to start going, and it's a very, very, to tell you the truth, a very, very difficult a very, very difficult Mishnah to understand in its depth. Just to read it and say this is not like this and this is not like this and both of them have Ruach Chaim and not like that and three of them don't have Darkei Lahanja. It's very easy to read quickly. But to plummet the depth of this Mishnah is a very, very profound and subtle message here. A very, very profound and subtle message.
You're saying that the Mishnah is here to look for differences it's that the similarities in a sense are given, or the similarities are more commonsensical. So the chidushim that the Mishnah is introducing is the differences, as you're saying, the differences which really emerge from the peculiarities.
It's the peculiar, yes. Because of these particularities, it's stopping me from making the mamatzinu, the kesha between these items. The reason why the Torah had to write both these items, the shor and the mava, is because if it didn't write both of these items, I would have thought that, excuse me, let me say again. I'm not saying well. If these items were indeed similar, which they seem to be in a Havamina, they seem to be similar enough that you can learn from, then I could not derive, then I would have deriven one from the other. And therefore, there would be an extraneous case here. So the Mishnah is trying to explain that there's no extraneous case here because there is you would have had a doubt as to which aspect of the case to derive the din from. Now, I'm going to have to say that again a lot slower, okay? Here, the Mishnah is telling us that there's an essential difference between these two cases. What would be if there was not essential difference? If there was no essential difference between the two, so then the Torah was wasting its time for writing both of them. Because if they had the same factor, then I could have written one and I would have learned the other. So the Mishnah is telling us no, that there is a critical factor here, which would have, even if you would have had one, you would have not derived the other. At first glance, these cases seem to have an LC common denominator. You could learn one from the other. The Mishnah, and if that were true, then we'd have a terrible situation, because then it would be no reason to write both of them. If I could derive one from the other, there's no reason to write both of them. So the Mishnah is telling us there's a reason why the Torah had to write both. Even though it seems as if you can derive one from the other, you would have had a doubt and you would have said it's not the sameness that's producing the din, it's the peculiarity that's producing the din. And therefore you would have, if I only had one case, I would have said, you know why you're obligated in the shore? Only because it has the horn, or it has the regel, or it has the shane. But a human being, let's say, not so, because it doesn't have those qualities. A human being doesn't do damage that way. It doesn't have those qualities.
Can I ask you, is it just I'm kind of groping in the dark here and just trying to make sense of this.
We're all groping. Okay.
But it's amazing. I mean, for me, what's fascinating in particular is the difference between this and philosophy. Because a philosopher, and really, there's no way of getting around Plato, because Plato is really the guy who started all of this way of thinking in terms of categories, and I mean, in the philosophical world. I mean, so philosophy is always looking for the sameness. Plato wanted to reduce the world to one single. There was who's the guy? Archimedes. Archimedes, he's the guy who jumped into the bathtub and he came up with the law of displacement. You could find out the volume of something by
Eureka.
With water. Yeah, Eureka, exactly. So he also said, he was famous for saying, he said, you know what? Give me one fixed point in the universe, and I'll rotate the whole universe around it. That's a very philosophical attitude. Like, give me one ikar, and then everything else will follow. Now, what I find amazing here is that this is rejecting that kind of thinking. It's saying, no, I mean, on the one hand, yes, these are all nizikin. So insofar as we're talking about nizikin is the super category that includes all four categories. And yet, there is no way, practically speaking, to reduce them all to a single definition for all four. And what I gather from this is that where that we see the difference play out is in the consequences, the legal consequences. In other words, there's not going to be one psak din that is going to be able to account for all four cases. That's where it's really felt.
Right. No, we're getting close to a very. No, it's a very essential point. We are not in. Okay, there's a lot of different things, very subtle things that we have to speak about. I'm going to jump the gun, okay, and I want to talk about principle that we also have to discuss in Darkei Talmud. The principle is like this. We don't allow repetition. And this is a learning person. We don't allow repetition. Okay? Now, what happens if you do find repetition? Wait a minute, we said you don't allow it. Now you're all of a sudden saying it exists? The contradiction. He says no. We don't allow meaningless contradiction. Meaningly repetition. If there is repetition, then it comes to mamayet. It comes to contract and to say only in those two cases and nowhere else. Let's play that again. If I could derive A from B, and both of them would be written, then the fact that something is repeated when it didn't have to be repeated comes to be a limitation. And to say we can no longer use any of these cases as categorical, and we cannot derive any new cases except the cases stated. Now, the Pnei Yeshua, one of our great rabbis, it says, this is the problem that the Mishnah is dealing with. If it were true that I could derive one of these four avos from the other, they would no longer be avos. They would be particulars again.
What do you mean? Right.
They would no longer be categorically, because we said when you repeat, and here I will extend it to the next level that he speaks about in the Darkei Gemara. Case A. If case B tells you what case A means, then we say that no longer can these two cases be extended. Anytime the Torah wants to extend to another similar case, it has to spell it out. So now, if I have A and B, I want to know case C, it must say case C. And if I have A, B, and C, it must say case D. And then I am limited to only the stated cases. Are you with me on that?
Yeah.
So the Pnei Yeshua explains here that the essential problem here is that if it would be true that these four cases could be derived from each other, then we would have the concept of avos would fall down completely, and we would there are no derivatives, and the only time that you could say a new case is included in the laws of damages is if it was specifically stated. So the Mishnah is going out of its way to tell us that these cases are indeed not repetitions, and therefore free to be used as categorical statements.
Wait, you said two things.
Go ahead, let's go through it. It's subtle.
It was. But they kind of amount to the same. You're saying if
it were true that these cases were equivalent.
Right.
Go ahead. Please talk. Let me stop.
So right. So if one case is derivable from the next one, then basically they stop being categories and they become particular cases.
If both
Does
of
that
them
mean
both of them then become right particular, and you can no longer category. Right. Good.
Right. So, but does that mean that it means though then there would be only one category, which really means nothing then? I mean,
no. I was not. No. I didn't communicate. There would be the category of shore, right, and then there would be the category of bore, but there would not be the category of mav hever.
I'm not following.
In other words, let's go again. There would only be the particulars of shore and bore, and there would we would not be allowed to say that any other cases fall into the law of damages. If I had one case and I could derive all the other ones, that's no problem whatsoever. I could use one case as a classic case and say that there's a common factor in that, an LCD even, that it's a damager, for instance, and then include every other case in it. But if I have another case which could have been derived from case A, then the Torah is telling me that I no longer can extend the law to any place that's not clearly written. So the only thing that we obligated would be the shore and the bore if they were written, and the aish and the hever, forget about it. And I couldn't even, and I'm supposing you couldn't even derive down into any of the subcategories because the repetition is a limitation. The repetition is a limitation. If it were true that the bore could be derived from the mava could be derived from the shore could be derived from the mava, and they were both written, then repetition turns into a limitation, turns into a miyut. Since repetition is not allowed, its existence forces us to say that the reason why it's there is to limit to these cases and nowhere else. It becomes a limitation. The repetition is a limitation and not an expansion.
You're saying we would only have the shore and the mavin.
That's right. Finished. No, we're not. Nothing else. So the Mishnah is forced to tell us that there's an, or not, it doesn't have to be essential, but that there's a difference in these two cases. Once there's a difference between these two cases, and the second case was not written as a limitation, but was written as an extension, as a chiddush. If it was simply repeating what the first case said, then it's a free to close off all extension. No more categories. It's a limitation. But if I could not have derived the second case from the first one, then there's obviously a reason for it to be derived, and then I could use them as extensions, categories, and not just particulars.
Wait, okay, I'm still not quite following. You're saying that if the Torah, hypothetically, had said only shor and mave, and that these two would be the identical case? Or
yes, in other words, they would share, that I would be able to derive one from the other. Through similarity, I would say that the two cases are essentially the same, even though there's what we call mikra differences. You know, one has skin, one has, who knows, one does it with the teeth, one, it doesn't matter. But the essential thing is that it's an animal that did damage. I don't care how he did the damage. So if or a man did damage, he's an animal that did damage. I don't care how he did it. I don't care the fact that it's a man. So if it were true that I could learn man from animal, animal from man, so to speak, right? Because I would say that the essential reason why you're obligated is because you had to watch this item, this living item, whether it's a man or an animal. If it were true that it was the sameness that was, or the LCD that was deriving this din, so then I could not extend the din anywhere. And if the Torah wanted to tell me that there was a new area where this din of Nezikin applies, it would have had to specifically state it.
Oh, wow, this is wild. So, okay, now I understand. Okay, so in other words, you're explaining why it says lo hare ashor kehare mavik lo hare mavik hare ashor. In other words, because by making an explicit distinction between these two and saying that these are not mutually derivable from each other, that fact opens up the possibility of two other categories. Otherwise, bor or behever would not be other categories, because it would be, everything would be closed up, everything would be collapsed.
That's right.
into one category which has two faces, a shor and a ma.
And no other category. In other words, nothing else
Right.
everything else would be out. And not only horizontally to the mav and the hever, I'm saying, but also not only but vertically down also. So the shane, the kicking and the biting and all those other derivatives also probably would go out, I would suppose, because the repetition became a limitation.
Right.
So the deeper level of this investigation is to explain what is the sameness that would have given you the hypothesis that you could derive one from the other.
Other than the Ruach Chaim being.
Yeah. So, but maybe
that seems to be the next line.
No, right? But that could have been it. By the way, in between those two. Between those two, you could say, well, the ruach, the factor that's causing the responsibility to pay for the damage is the ruach chaim aspect, and that could have been equally demonstrated by the shor or the mava, the man or the animal, because I would have said man doesn't represent the peculiarities of man, that he has das and all those things are not going to be the reason for the law. I could have thought that it's the lower LCD man, that he was just an animal that's causing the responsibility, and therefore animal could come in. Or the opposite way, if I had an animal, I would say, well, it's the animal nature of the object that's causing the obligation, and therefore the man has that nature, and also obviously would be obligated also. So if that were true, says the Mishnah, then we would not be able to spread this din horizontally to the mav or the hever, or vertically down to any of the other derivatives, because the law is repetition means limitation. So the Mishnah is telling us that there's an essential factor. There's a reason why these had to be written, because if they weren't written, excuse me, let me say it again. I must tell you that there's a factor that makes them different, because if they were alike, then we would not be able to use them as avos at all, as categories at all.
Right.
Okay.
But you're also saying, if I'm not mistaken, that, see, I mean, one of your questions was just the order of the Mishnah here. Why, after presenting all four categories, does it contrast the first and the third?
Right.
Why does it jump over the second, right? So
right.
Now what you're saying is that first of all, the first and the third have this natural affinity with each other, both Ruach Chaim. So you would have thought that they could constitute a single category.
That's right.
Right. Now, here's, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying since there's a difference between these two categories, that difference between specifically those two, that difference opens up the possibility of two more categories.
Right.
Which would not have been there if those two had been collapsible into each other.
That's right.
So that's why the Mishnah is specifically turning to number 1 and number 3 rather than
correct.
in any other order. Okay.
That's correct.
That's great. That makes a lot of sense.
Now the only question is, why didn't it present the first 4 in that order? If really it was going to, in the next statement, compare 1 and 3, so put 1 and 3 together.
Okay.
So there, the Rashi will tell you, well, the Mishnah really loves to follow the order of the Chumash. There's what the Chumash says as an observant Jew, and then there's the analysis. Now, the analysis does not have to be in the same order as the presentation of the Chumash. Those are two separate issues. One is the observable facts of the Chumash, the presentation. Now, the second thing is that question of analysis. So, as you said very correctly, in analyzing this problem of sameness, you put 1 and 3 together because they're the most same of the two. If you would have thought that there was one that could have been derived from the other, it would have been the shor and the mava, and not the bor. So that's why you skip the bor. But in presentation, you should first present the information as the Chumash does, And then you go into your analysis. That's a different way of presentation. Just like I mentioned that the Chumash basically, the format of the Chumash is basically in a timeline. And the format of the Mishnah is in content. Well, here we have another distinction between the presentation in the Mishnah and the presentation in the Chumash and the function of the Mishnah, which is to teach us the process of limud, of derivation, of ideas, of halachas. I wish I had a better word for that, but it's a very important distinction here. In other words, definitely we can understand that there's a presentation in the Chumash, and it's very, very essential as we spoke about it and we began to analyze. But then there's another level of analysis which is called lumdus, which is the rules of derivation, that the internal rules of derivation that it uses to derive principles that we have to handle. That's what the Mishnah has to handle. That's what it has to talk about. It has to say, wait a minute, it's very nice you presented your information the way you did, Chumash, but doesn't it look as if you're repeating information and therefore you're limiting the cases to particulars and not making them general rules again? So Mishnah has to say, wait a minute here. There's a factor here that's an essential one that will break this learning up, and therefore we can keep the extension. We can keep our avos as categories. But that presentation is a second stage from the present. In other words, that investigation is not based on the same seder as the first. Okay, and that's why the Mishnah switches the seder, because one is the presentation in the Chumash, but the other one is the analytic question which we're dealing with, and there 1 and 3 makes a lot of sense to compare because they're the most similar, and they look as if they're repetitious. And if there is repetition, we can't go on anymore. To bore and to hever, we can't go on. We're stopped.
Presumably the seder of the Krah, I mean, Rashi is not. He's not just saying that we have to show fidelity to show fidelity to Scripture.
No.
I mean, presumably, as the Eibishter's, the Kodesh Baruch Hu's Seder also has some value.
That's what I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to explain. That there's a Kodesh Baruch Hu Seder of presentation, which in and of itself is very, very important, essential, and must be analyzed as it is. But then we have another level of analysis, which is the rules of the Torah and how that now interacts with the presentation. I hope I'm being clear. You see?
Yeah.
And both of them have to be handled individually and then handled in conjunction with each other. Just like, as I tried to bring an analogy, the presentation of the Chumash could be chronological, but you have to then analyze and say, well, now this case of Misa was mentioned in Vayikra and in Shemos. You have to pull those two things together and now start comparing them and seeing what develops from the analysis of the relationship of those two cases. So the Torah asks us to jump off the page. It's very important that it's done in a time level. That's a very important havchana. We're going to learn a lot of things about that. But there's another dimension which comes from a different aspect, which gives us a whole new insight to what's going on. So we had to talk about Shur B'Mav and having the Chumash lay it out that way. But there's another level of what we call lumdus, of analysis of the Torah's inner workings and producing new dinim that have to be handled. And the key here is that word avos. Okay.
This is very cool.
Okay, this is it. You see,
it totally opens up the text.
Exactly, and this is what is the difficulty in, and this is why, what is the difficulty in teaching a class? This is very subtle. If it's not understood, it's not understood. You know what I mean? And everybody, it would be wonderful if everybody was on the same wavelength, but it doesn't happen, unfortunately. So it's a very so what happens is a lot of information is memorized and is understood, but this type of subtle relationship is overlooked because there's not enough time put into it. And that's what it says in the beginning of Darkei Gemara. If you're going to get the real wisdom of Torah, then you have to put time into it. You have to go over the text many, many, many times because there's a deep, subtle level of information that's being spoken about in these very, very surface level and simple words. And it requires deep analysis. And that's just very hard to do in a large systematic way because you just have to get it. That's why I really believe that the essence again was the Talmud and the Rebbe, because at a certain place that intimacy of what you're getting and what you're not getting and what you're understanding and what you're not understanding has to be there in order to be guided into these levels. I mean, that's the real way it has to be done. Now, there's more levels and levels we're not talking about, but that's and it's unfortunate that because people we are overloaded with information, and we unfortunately miss this subtle. We have no time. What do you mean you have no time? You're missing the beauty, the harmony, the depth of what's going on over here. Okay, so that's what's happening. Okay, so let's. When did we start here? All the times are all mixed up now. We saw at 10:30, 11:30, 12:30. Okay, so we'll hold it here. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, you know, we have all these research. Now they put the Daf Yomi on the iPad. I mean, you know, they're really going, you know, wild with the technology. It's going to help to a certain degree because more people will be involved with the words. But this type of subtlety, you're not going to produce it so easily. Now, what I would like to do here is the next time, I keep saying the next time, but you know, because it's chaval not to touch the beauty of the harmonies that are happening in here, is to really to focus now on this last in here, Meitav Haaretz, okay, and to discuss that again in conjunction with, or in interaction, I like that word better, with the Chumash. Okay, so there's beautiful things to speak about here, but because I have this idea that I really would like to show you how each section interacts with each other, so we're going to, if you please remind me, that we really should focus on Meitav and compare that to the Chumash, you see? And then we're ready to go into the next level. And once we understand what's this chiddush of Meitav, you see, there's a chiddush here. Just to tell you, a hint of next week's class. The damages that we have to label them. You see, we have to categorize them. You see, there's corporal punishment, there's the capital punishment, there's corporal punishment, there's monetary punishment. You see, there's compensation, there's kanas. We have a few categories there. This one is a explosion. It makes no sense. L'chora, of course. Again, I'm building it up to show. It's a question. If you use the word Meitav, you're supposed to fall down because all these things have Meitav. There's only one particular that has Meitav. And what is this din Meitav? You pay what you damage. What is this din you pay with the best of your few? It comes from outer space. So that's going to be our focus. We're going to look at the Chumash. We're going to look at where it's located. We're going to look at this. We're going to see why it's here. And then we're ready for stage 3, which is to go to that next stage of analysis in the Gemara Bezat Hashem. Okay?
Sounds great.
Okay. Okay. So now our class, so what's best for you now? Wednesday, Thursday? Where you hold, or your things haven't settled yet?
Well, I guess either one is good. Because I teach, let's see, the truth is, I guess Wednesday is a little bit better because I don't teach at night. But as it happens, next Wednesday, I've been asked to give a Pesach talk to a group of women. So I don't know. Let's keep it for Thursday for now, and then like tonight. Thursday,
okay, so we'll keep it for Thursday. Now I did something. I'm just going to shut off the. Okay, I don't know. Who knows what? Shut off this recording here. How do you say stop here? all these modern things. Now, I don't want to stop the meeting. I just want to stop the recording. Mute, invite. They have all these nice buttons here. You have to know what button do you push. Share my webcam. Where does it say stop recording? Okay, it doesn't matter. I don't have the time to do that. I want to show you something. What I did in the casino. My strength is Seder. It's one of my most interesting questions. Really, I happen to love Seder. So the what do we call the book that we read?
Hello?
We call it we call it the Seder of Pesach, right? Pesach Seder, we call it. First, not the book. We call the whole day or the whole experience the Pesach Seder, right?
Right.
So the question is, what's the Seder? It looks like a balagan. The kids are saying, fathers, they're asking questions, where's the Seder? Okay, now once you start investigating the Seder, so I did a Haggadah where I showed, again, Shorish. You see, he says in Darkei Gemara, go down to the source. What's the source of the Haggadah? Where does it come from? Where does the Seder come from? You see? And then what is the Seder? And let's follow each other. And that's a whole beautiful thing, and I'll just tell you again in 3-4 words. There's a crescendo of experience that comes through the Seder. You have to get from the Averas and the Mitzrayim part, and you have to go up and up and up until you reach Hallel is the highest form of ascension to a real love of a Kodesh Baruch Hu and appreciation. But you can only get there from starting at the Gnus and the low levels of being a slave and being wiped out and everything, you know what I mean, really down. And then you have to watch the Seder rising us up and up and up till the end of the Seder. You're there with a Kodesh Baruch Hu on the 4th cup, and wow, you know. But that's something that you have to appreciate. But I'll send you my Haggadah, okay? And in the Haggadah, it's one of these visual things, but what it does is it shows you the sources of things, and it shows you, it doesn't tell you my Ika Chiddush, which is, that's, again, we're always off the page, if you know what I mean. The words are going to now lead you to the relationship. You see, and it's chaval that people don't understand that, but that's what it does. The words and the halacha guide you off the page into the relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. So you have to see the process and then be part of the process, and then you really have the devekas. So I love Pesach. Every holiday is great. Each one has its unique relationship with Hashem, but Hallel at the end of the Seder to me is, there's 2 highs: Shabbos Sukkos for me, and Hallel on Pesach. Those are 2 very special highs, because there was so much work that went into that precious moment of elevation. And if you let it surf, so to speak, if you surf the wave and you take it where it's supposed to go, wow, it's a tremendous relationship with Hashem. Anyway, Bli Neder, I will send you my Seder Haggadah. Okay, have a great day. So we're back on Thursday, right? Is that right? That's a conclusion.
Right. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Great. Have a great
Thank
week.
you.
Go to.
You too.